Welcome back to the Resilience Pod, the podcast helping you become resilient in our world full of disruptions. I'm your host, Reinventing. This is part one of a two-part series. Yes, for the first time in the Resilience Pod studio, we're doing a two-part series. And this is the origin that you need to know so you can understand the battle that my next guest is facing as she helps us become resilient. Wow, more on that later. But today's episode is centered around resilience, grit, reinvention, relocation, immigration, illness, loss, all before deepfake fraud prevention and resilience really entered my next guest's life. I am pinching myself as I say this and do this introduction because I am sat in front of the most remarkable woman I have come across. So it is with immense pleasure to introduce CEO of Deepfake Resilience at Shreem Partners, Aarti Samani. Welcome.
Reena, thank you. You're so kind. Thank you for that introduction. I'm delighted to be here with you. Thank you for inviting me and looking forward to this.
I cannot wait. Seriously, I am not joking. I don't say this often. This is a pinch me moment. I appreciate your generosity and time. Like, you are the most busiest woman I've seen. And the fact that you're here recording this in person, oh, wow, I can't wait. So I'm going to get straight into it because the context is really important about your life. And it will make sense when we discuss part two. And that's why it's a two-part series, guys. So I want to go dig a bit deep, like not back, way back when, about the foundations of your identity. So you grew up in India. I love that. And then you were in a convent school environment. Wow. Looking back now at this age that you are now, as you sit in this studio, how has that experience shaped your mindset and then helped you prepare for being so resilient?
Yeah, it was an interesting time growing up in sort of 70s, 80s India, right? Which is just finding its identity post-independence. Yes. So it was sort of trying to be globalized, but not quite there yet. And it actually shaped the foundation of everything that I have done in my life from then onwards, right? So I grew up in Gujarat. I'm from a Gujarati family, and fairly traditional in some ways. We lived in a multi-generational family. Yes. So my grandma was with us, and she shaped a lot of the cultural, religious values in us growing up. The childhood stories and the way she would raise us, etc. Me and my siblings. So it shaped a lot of that. But interestingly, my family are actually from East Africa. So they're from Uganda. Like, my parents are both born in Uganda. Some grandparents were also born there. And then they went to India for the first time in the 70s when the whole Idi Amin incident happened in Uganda. So for them, India was a new country, and then they had their children there. And so for me, it was native homeland. For my parents, it was a foreign country. So it was very interesting dynamic. So I grew up in that environment. It was a very good life. My father had flour mills. So he was an industrialist and a global one at that. We had a beautiful house, a mansion, white marbles everywhere. It was just a very nice, idyllic life, and it was every Sunday we would go to the ashram where our guru would teach us, and he was a very old, his body was like 80 years old. Gosh. So long white beard and sort of very nice, wise, deep eyes. Yeah. So when he looked at you, he wasn't just looking at you, he was communicating with you. Wow. And it was just, we looked forward to those Sundays where we would go and sit down and he would teach us and he would guide us. And it didn't feel like a chore. Like, it didn't feel like we were there for the temple because our parents forced us. Yeah. It was a genuine Sunday family activity. All of us went. And then after that, we would go, my parents would take us out and everything. So that was like a nice, beautiful family home environment. And then, as it was customary in India at that time, if you wanted to be learning studying, if you wanted your education to be in English language, then typically you were put in convent schools. So then you had a very Catholic environment at school. You know, the nuns were fantastic. They were running the school. And so they were imbibing sort of values and morals in a different way. So ultimately, the underlying message is the same, but the approach is different. And that taught, that taught me a lot of discipline and rigor, right? Like you couldn't really step out of line at school. You had to be literally and metaphorically, you were always in a straight line. And in those days, like being hit was quite normal at school. So I grew up in that sort of environment. So that shaped my outlook, but it also made me very open about everything, right? So although I'm born of a Hindu faith, I'm very aware of other faiths and teachings, and I regularly go to churches. I go to other religious places, as well as following my own path, which was imbibed by my family. So it was a beautiful environment. Like there was no segregation. It was a very integrative, holistic, 360-degree upbringing, which I look back on very fondly.
Amazing. I mean, there's so much to unpack in everything you said, and a lot of it really resonates with me because my parents grew up in Zambia. So African, then they went to, my father especially, and then went to India. So very much like kind of your story kind of is originated from there. And maybe not the whole convent school part, but that's where it shows like real resilience really embedding in, because you've already kind of moved a lot, and what your family has is ingrained in it. I love that.
Yeah, and the stories you grow up with, I'm sure you have the same experience, right? Like it's hilarious. For the longest time, my parents would just include Swahili words in conversation. And I grew up thinking they were perfectly normal Hindi words, Gujarati words, right? Until my friends at school would be like, what are you talking about? We don't understand. And same with food. I'm sure you experience the same thing. Like we eat, cassava, plantain recipes made in African way. And my friends could never understand, like we've never tasted anything like this. So it was very interesting.
And you just think that's normal, because same, like I just think that's just normal Gujarati food. Like, And
interestingly, many years later, we went to Uganda after my father's death. I took my mom and my grandma, and we went to Uganda for the first time for us, me and my siblings, after around a gap of 40 years from my mother and my grandmother, and having like lost my father. So we went there, and there was a point, at one point we were at a property that was owned by our family long time ago. And we went there, and there was an elderly Ugandan man who came out, and he saw my grandmother and he recognized her. And this was a lady in her late 70s, early 80s by then, right? So he came and he recognized her, and he started to speak to her in Gujarati. And that was like really amazing. And she was communicating with him Swahili, and they were like having this multilingual conversation. And then throughout our trip there, every time we went somewhere like in the forests, and we did a 3-week tour of the country, and at regular intervals we were served rotli, chapatis and shak and some Gujarati food, and I'd be like, oh, thank you, this makes us feel at home. And the young Ugandan girls who were preparing this food, they were like, oh, this is Ugandan food, I hope you enjoy it. And I'm like, okay, that makes sense. So it was like that interchange, right? We grew up thinking this food is Gujarati. They grew up thinking this food is Ugandan. And in reality, there was an infusion of languages and food and culture and everything. So it was beautiful.
I just love that. And I think this is really important. And audience, stay with us if you're watching and listening, because this is really relevant. The context behind you is really relevant. So hold that thought there, because I want to move on to, I just love this like really nice beginning. You stayed there for 16 years. At 16 years old, you moved to the UK. Wow, what a shift. Like, you've developed all your thought patterns, you've grown, you're a teenager, you have certain thought processes and thinking, and then you come to a Western country, which is obviously completely different. how did that move shape your identity and belonging? Or did it? Did you feel like you didn't belong? I have a really vested interest in this, which I will share after you answer your question.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that was probably one of the most interesting periods of my life because, like I said, I was 16, so I was kind of formulated my identity, my personality and everything. And going back to what I was saying, India was finding its post-independence identity.
Yeah.
So in those days, we were very patriotic. Like, at school, we were waving flags and singing national anthems, and we were learning like the colonial history and everything. So there was a certain level of you form a vision of what Britain and British people are like, right?
Yeah.
And then you kind of, I didn't want to come here. And my father said, well, darling, we're just going to go on a holiday. And in those days, you didn't get asked, you get told, right? So it's in your interest that you pack your bags without further conversation.
Oh, I see.
So I thought we were coming on a holiday. And he thought that too. None of us, my parents didn't know that this was going to be home and that we would never go back. So we came here, and we landed, I remember, in Gatwick Airport, April. It was grey. The skies were grey. And the recession of 1991 had gripped United Kingdom. Like, it was very, very stark from where I had come from. Sunny, bright, luxurious living, forward-looking industrialist lifestyle and all that. We came here and it was completely different. And through various chain of events, it meant that we had to stay here at least for a couple of years, 3 years or so. But there was it's not like we didn't have a home, right? Yeah. Because we didn't come to live here. So we didn't have a home. My parents didn't have a source of income because the business was back in India, etc. Yeah. So it kind of, we came into a very different environment. So overnight, like the 10-hour flight just changed 180 degrees. My life has changed 180 degrees, right? So you come here, you start to kind of find yourself again, right? And you have to try and understand the culture while you're still invisible. So you go to school, like we went to very good schools here, and it was a fantastic environment at school, but I'm trying to break into groups of other 16-year-old girls who have been friends since they were 11. Yes. They don't know me. My accent is different. We don't have the cultural references that we can relate with. I never studied European history. They never studied Indian history. It was entirely different. And they were very welcoming for most part, but we didn't have the same sense of humor because I didn't understand their humor. So I couldn't take part in the conversations we never had any shared experiences, basically, right? Yeah. So it was a different environment. But in that moment, you kind of learn to read the room very well. Yeah. Because what I was doing, and I didn't know at the time, is that I was going into a room, I was trying to understand the culture and fit in there, right? So I was trying to adapt to what was going on around me. Now, if you take, fast forward 30 years, I use that all the time now. Yeah. I walk into a room and I adapt myself to that room, to the people in that room, to the environment. And it's because I very early on, at 16, I formulated I developed that muscle, that, that trait of being able to read the room very quickly, understand the dynamics, adapt to it, to know when to speak and to know when not to speak and listen, and then when to utilize what you have heard to further the conversation, to progress the conversation or whatever it is that you're in a room for. So it was a very interesting time for me, especially the first 2 years. And then I went to university. Then it's a hit reset, right?
Yeah.
Because at that time, everybody's new.
Yes.
None of you have shared experiences, right? So you're building shared experiences together. And then things changed and transformed.
Wow, I absolutely love this. And for several reasons. One, the whole belonging, shared experience is really insightful to get your take on that. And secondly, the reading the room and reinventing yourself to adapt. So I've written down adaptive here because that's a very key word for me. So true. And then I love the third bit about the resetting yourself at university. It's so true. A lot of us can relate to that. Now, the reason why I have a vested interest in this question is whilst I wasn't born in India, I was born in this country, but we have similar backgrounds. So I was born Hindu, raised Gujarati. And I always felt that living here, being born here, that identity and belonging was very you're in a catch-22 situation. So I'm also Indian, but I also feel British. Where do I go? I'm not either. I'm not Indian, because when I used to go to India, I'd be totally an outsider and it would be obvious. When I'm here, I'm not totally English, and it was just that torn between two. And I know a lot of people face that. And it's just really interesting to get your insights into how you felt. And I feel like I resonate with that a lot because like you, I would say that I also have adapted to the rooms and situations I'm in to fit in, but in the right way. So you're not losing your own identity, you're adapting to that. So I find it fascinating. And I wanted to share that with you, part of me with you.
Yeah, thank you. No, that makes sense. So it's interesting, when you are born in a certain country, yet you're visibly different, then that sense of identity becomes very it becomes very opaque, right? Or translucent, you're neither here nor there. And then you have to own a certain piece of yourself, which makes you unique, I guess, in some ways. So,
well, we have the luxury because we can dip in and out of our different cultures.
Right.
That's how I see it. That's how I see it. So no identity crisis here, guys. Okay, moving on from that, it's really fascinating. I want to talk about, in your 20s, you had a very life-changing moment where you were diagnosed with ovarian cancer. That's quite heavy hitting. I want you to talk to me about how did this diagnosis change the trajectory of your life? And I appreciate that's a very heavy question. And I really appreciate you being open to sharing this experience with us.
Yeah, well, I'll start with marking the milestone that I'm still here.
Yes.
And it's 30 years this year.
Oh, gosh.
So we're having this conversation in my 30th anniversary.
Okay.
So
something to celebrate.
Come a long way from then. But that was a period of life which was very transformative in a lot of ways, physically, emotionally, personality, in every way, right? So we came to Britain, very different environment here. Then I went to university. So I was now very happy. At 18, I went to Durham University, which also came with some challenges. It wasn't easy to get to the university because they wanted to charge me foreign fees, which was very expensive. Okay. My parents were not in a position to pay that. But I navigated around that. And Durham was a fantastic place. The principal and the vice principal, I still remember them so fondly, Dr. Judith Turner and Mr. George Patterson. I'm very fond of them. And they made me feel very welcome in the college, etc. So I was thriving. I met friends who are still my friends for life. I learned British culture. They learned Indian culture from me. I was finally part of the group. I was finally part of the society. I was part of the fabric, and I didn't feel like an outsider anymore, right? So I was loving every minute of university. I was studying mathematics, which was my favorite subject. I was learning from the best brains in the world, and that was a privilege for me. Institutions of knowledge, for me, they're like temples, right? So I just loved every minute of being there. Even during college vacations, I spent most time at university. I would only go home for a few weeks to see my family and not come back as quickly as I can. So at the end of my second year, when I went home for the summer, my thought was that I'll be back in 4 or 5 weeks. I had an internship back at home. So I thought I'll finish the internship and come back and start my year earlier. Well, I didn't come back at all. So I went home in Birmingham, and I was happily living my life, and I was kind of putting on weight, and I thought, oh, well, maybe I'm not exercising enough. It's mom's home cooked food and all that. And then it got very uncomfortable. I was putting on too much weight around my abdomen. And then I went to see the GP, and he said, well, first I saw the nurse, and the nurse said, oh, well, congratulations, my dear. You're going to have a baby. I was like, what are you talking about? I'm 20 years old at this point, right?
Oh, God.
And she said, no, darling, these things happen at universities. We understand. And there is a support structure around you. So don't worry about it. I'm like, no, you don't get it. Like, no, this can't be. There's something else, right? You've got this wrong. And so she said, well, in that case, you need to be seen by the GP. So let me go and call him. So then the doctor came, he examined me, and he looked very grave, and he wouldn't tell me what he was thinking. But he basically said, you need to go for a scan tomorrow, and it's quite urgent. So here's the note. By this time, it's 6:30 in the evening. And he said, 8 o'clock tomorrow morning, you need to go to the hospital and get your scan done. So I said, okay, sure. And not really thinking anything about it, right? So I happily go home, do my thing. Now, you're Indian, so you will understand that the concept of privacy is like almost non-existent, right? So by the time I'm going home, he had already called my father, and he had spoken to my father and said, look, Aarti has been to see me. I've examined her, and I think she needs to have a scan done immediately. We don't know what it is, but she needs to do this straight away. So please make sure it happens. So I go home, and my parents are like, what is going on? Like, what? Tell us what. And I said, nothing. I just went for the thing. Now I have to go for the scan. So they're like, okay, we're coming with you. So actually, my mother was not in the country at the time. She was traveling. So it was only my father. So I was like, no, Dad, no. Anyway, we went for the scan, and it took the whole day because they were trying to fit me in. But by the end of the day, when the scan happened, the doctor said to my father, he said, look, she needs to have a surgery immediately. So I'm going to write a note to the hospital, and please be on standby. Like, as soon as they call you, you have to go. And I was like still very confused, no idea what was going on. My father was equally confused. Anyway, so, but from that point to getting to the hospital, my condition worsened overnight. Like overnight, I was literally in bed, like going from a very active individual to bedridden. And then I went into hospital. They did the surgery and everything. They made me sign a blank form. I was like, okay, because they said, look, I don't know what I'm going to find you when I open you up. So I need your consent to say you trust me and you will allow me to do what's best for you. Okay. So I was like, okay, I have no option, right? So I'm just going to sign it. And remember, I'm only 20, right? So I don't have a lot of awareness about everything. God, Aarti. And this is back in the 90s. So things are a little different to what they are today in terms of general information that is available to you. Anyway, after surgery, there was a week of recovery in the hospital and everything. And then one day this doctor comes and she pulls the curtains around me and says, I need to have a conversation with you. So I'm like, yeah, sure. And she said, look, the tests have shown that it's a very aggressive form of cancer. And so you will need chemotherapy and further treatment, and the oncologist will come and talk to you about it. Yeah. So all that information was given to me very, very quickly. And I didn't really have time to process it. But my head is, I'm very practical, pragmatic individual. So in my head, I'm thinking, okay, it's now almost lunchtime. My mom will be on her way, bringing lunch. But it takes her like 3 buses to get to the hospital. So I'm just going to call her and say, look, don't come for lunch. Just you and Dad come later on, because then you can meet the oncologist at the same time. So my grandma answered the call, and I said to my grandma, I said, look, this is what the doctors just told me. Just tell Mom to not come. And she said, what? What did you just say? So I said, I've been diagnosed with cancer, blah, blah, blah. And she's like, okay, fine, I will let your mother know. You go and get some rest, my dear. So I was like, okay, didn't think anything of it. And then, of course, my parents do come at lunchtime, and they've both been crying, and there's like, red puffed up eyes and everything. And I was like, are you okay? What's wrong with you? And they're like, what's wrong with you? So you have this like really weird dialogue. Yeah. And then anyway, they bring me, in those days, you'd have handwritten letters. Yeah. So my college friends are sending me handwritten letters. So every day they would bring me a stack of letters, which, it kept me going. Yeah. And it means I was getting the news from what's happening at university. Yeah. Anyway, they come and they say, look, we should make a list of questions that you need to ask the oncologist. Yeah. Like, do you have in mind what you're going to ask? And I'm like, yeah, I'm going to say, when will the treatment start? When will it finish? When can I go back? Because my term starts in a few weeks, right? So I need to be back beginning of October. So they listened to me very patiently. And then my father said, aren't you going to ask him, what's your prognosis? And then the world went silent around me. Like literally, even now, I feel the silence. And I was like, Dad, what do you mean? And he said, this is a very aggressive form of cancer. And from what the consultant have told us so far, it's not looking great. So aren't you going to ask oncologist what your prognosis are, because you are an adult now and we are not allowed to ask questions on your behalf. And the doctors were very clear about it. So I said, oh, okay, sure, I will. And then after the visiting hours, I had time to process the information, and then it kind of all hit me a bit. And then when the oncologist came, we had conversation. My parents were not in any form of they were not really together, right? They were too shocked and everything. And then kind of the journey started. It was clear I wasn't going back to college anytime soon. Yeah. I had to go through the treatment and all that. So this is how the whole thing kind of unfolded for me. It's like a movie when I look back on it now. But the oncologist was fantastic. Dr. Chris Poole, I still remember him very fondly. And he became... he was very much a family for the next 5-7 years of my life, when we were going through different stages of treatment and follow-on conversations. But that shaped me in ways that I had never imagined was possible. Yeah. So for me, like, the resilience comes from lived experiences, right? Like, it's a practice. It's a practice that shaped me every step of the way.
Wow. I think that moment deserves a silence and just an applaud for just your resilience as a whole. So glad you're still here, and being able to share this. That's a tough time for anyone, let alone being 20 and going through something like this. But I'm glad that you're able to share that story with us. And I want to move the conversation slightly on, because you've kind of battled this. We understand your upbringing. You're going into the working world now. So we're skipping a little bit of a timeline there, but you're still having repeated surgeries because the cancer's coming back and forth. How did you navigate those years whilst working? Because work back then is not work like it is now. So talk to me a little bit about that. I'm really interested to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, sure. So you're right. I didn't know whether I would see my 21st birthday or not. Yeah. And I did. And I finished the treatment. I went back to university, finished my degree. And I still remember when I got my certificate, for me, it was not just receiving the degree. It was a declaration that I'm here. Yeah. I'm ready to enter the world. I've made it. I'm now ready to step into a proper world, into the real world. The challenge for me was that employers saw me as very high risk, right? And understandably so. When you've had this form of treatment, they worry that I will need repeat treatment, etc. And that is perfectly understandable. Why they feel that way. And they saw me as a liability, right? So they were worried that if they employed me, that not only would I take time off work and it would cost them, but the insurance, because employers typically provide medical insurance, that would be a huge expense, that I would not be delivering the work. I'm not with it because chemotherapy is known to be kind of foggy and everything. So it was very difficult for me to convince them that actually I am normal, and my markers were showing normal by that point. So I wasn't on any planned treatment anymore. I was just on the checkups and the follow-ups. And Dr. Poole became very instrumental at that point, where he was writing letters. Every job interview I went to, he would give me a letter to say, look, this lady is perfectly normal. She has she's only as much of a risk as any other person that you hire, like she's no risk, etc. So it kind of it became a bit of a challenge, but eventually British Airways offered me a job on their graduate training program, which was fantastic. Like it's a very good company. I loved working there. I got my job there, and I was again thriving one more time, right? I was really progressing, doing well in my career. I had just, after having worked at that company for about 5 years, I was just about to start a new role in investment banking and, working in the city. And I was very excited and looking forward to those bright, shiny lights and everything. And I went for my checkup. It was going to be my last checkup before they gave me a clean bill of health. And I was going to be off the register on my 5-year mark. And I went there, and Dr. Poole did the usual scans and everything, and he could see a shadow in my chest area. And he kind of said, okay, it took basically the whole day of that day when he was doing repeat tests and everything. And I thought he was just being cautious because it's my last one. And by this time he knew me very well, so he wouldn't alarm me unnecessarily. And then I went back to London, and then he called me this was on a Friday, he called me on a Monday, and I said, look, darling, you're going to have to come back. There is a problem in your chest and you will need a surgery. And he said, at this point, I don't know what it is, but it's not something we can ignore. We can't keep it inside you. You'll have to come back. So I go back. I didn't tell my parents about this conversation. So I just showed up at home one time, and my parents are like, you just went to London like 3 days ago. Why are you back already? Then I had to tell them that, look, we have to go and see a surgeon tomorrow. Dr. Poole has made this appointment for me, etc. And they were just devastated. Like I can still see my parents' face, so anyway, we went back, we went to the surgeon that I had to go and see, and the surgeon said that we don't think this is cancer. It looks very benign, but it's positioned between your heart and your lungs. Okay. And so we have to remove it. So it's like, okay, that's fine. Yet again, sign a blank form because I don't know what they will find inside. So they had to kind of operate me, and they removed whatever it was. It was benign, so there was no further treatment. But the recovery post-surgery took a long time because of the way they had to operate it. But that meant I was taking time off. I wasn't taking time off work because I had already resigned from one job and I was waiting to start another one. So it was a bit of a period where I didn't know whether they would still accept me in the role or not. So you kind of go through, and it reset my cycles of checkups again and again. It reset my cycle of getting life insurance, getting mortgages very easily. Whenever I got a mortgage, I had to pay a higher rate of interest because the lenders felt I was high risk, etc. So the impact of something like this is not just on your body and your emotion and your family, right? The impact on the family is huge. My parents, my siblings, like their teenage years were eclipsed with my hospital appointments, etc. So the impact is massive, but it's also commercial impact. Impact on whether you can borrow money to buy a house or not, whether you can get travel insurance, life insurance, etc. So it has a lot of, it touches every part of your life. So I went like that, those 10 years of my 20s, basically the whole decade from 20 to 30, I was sort of in and out of surgeries, not cancer. The cancer was only the one time. The other two surgeries were benign surgeries, but it was kind of taking time to recover. And all the time I kept going. So from one investment bank, built a career there, then went to another one, took a more senior position there, and did really well, like, working on trade flows globally all over the world. It was very, very interesting work. It was great colleagues. I loved being in that environment, but all the time still navigating this other part of life. But the point is that you don't stop. Like, you don't let life happen to you. You make life happen for you, right? So I couldn't control. There were certain levers that I had no control over. But then there were certain other levers that I had full control over. So I took kind of that, I took the approach that I am going to control the levers that I can, and I'm going to control them very well. Right. And I'm going to make sure that in some ways diminishes the impact or of the levers that I do not have control over. So that kept me going. And it was, I look back on those years, not with regret, disappointment, or any kind of negative emotion. I look on those years as stepping stones of where life took me from then on, right? So again, those unspoken skills that you learn that no business school can teach you, right? So the skills of kind of, keep going, crisis management and this and that, like all those things that you learn in textbooks. I learned on the job. I learned on the job in life. So I navigated as best as I could given the circumstances, and I never allowed it to be an impediment for me.
And this is what makes you truly remarkable, Aarti, because another said person would just feel like giving up, and you wouldn't blame someone for doing that, but you've used this to enhance your remarkableness, like just to pave the way forward. And like, guys, if you're watching or listening, you're going to understand this so much more when you finish this episode and we go on to part 2 of why I keep saying she's remarkable. So stay with me and trust me on that. Thank you. Now, we're going quite deep, but I feel like it's really important to keep going deep into this so people can understand where you're coming from when we go to part 2, when we progress this episode. Because after all this, life shifted for you. Now, you come from a very a tight-knit family, and that's so prevalent in our culture as well. And in most cultures, but very much so in the Indian culture. And you lost your father, and you mentioned that at the beginning, that you lost your father. And now suddenly you're the head of the family. You're also a mother. Your mother was widowed. And you took on the responsibility of that family. Now that's quite heavy. How did you navigate that period? And was there scrutiny for you within your own family about what was going to happen, the uncertainty? Does being Indian play a factor in that? Or is your experience just the same as anyone else's?
Another turning point. And the way it happened, actually, it's, I'll just take a slight detour. So I'd just had a surgery. And I'd come back. So the surgery I had on my birthday, end of November, I recovered over December, and I hadn't fully recovered, but enough to kind of move again and go back to work. So I came back to work end of January. End of January. So I'd only been at work a couple of weeks, like 10 days or so. And even in those 10 days, I had made one trip back because I had an appointment. So I went home, did the appointment. Everything was fine. Spent time with my parents, etc. Come back to work. And then just 2 days later, I get a phone call from my sister. And I thought it was a regular phone call. And she's like, can you come home immediately? I said, what are you talking about? I've just been home like 3 days ago. Why do you need me home now? And I was a little frustrated, you know. I was kind of thinking, okay, now you need to step up, right? You need to step up now.
Yeah.
You're old enough.
Understood.
And she was very patient, incredibly patient with me. And she said, look, please trust me when I tell you, pack your bags, you'll be here for a few days and come home. Pack Indian clothes and bring Indian clothes with you. And I thought, what is going on? I couldn't understand what was going on. And I said, oh, fine, if I really have to, I will. But, you know, by the time I pack and leave and then drive home, it's going to take me a few hours and you'll just have to manage with whatever's going on, right? And she said, please believe me when I say come home immediately, come home immediately. So I was like, okay, fine. So I go home. I was out at that point. I go back, pack my bags. My brother was with me at the time. So we both pack our bags and we drive home. And, you know, Saturday night traffic from London to Birmingham was taking me some time. So anyway, 2.5, 3 hours later, I get home. And she said, look, Dad is unwell, so come straight to the hospital.
Okay.
So we went straight to the hospital, me and my brother. And when we get there, her whole family is there, my extended family, but also my mom, my grandma, my sisters, everyone. And I was like, oh, what is going on here? And I was like extremely irritated. And I go in and immediately I have my mom on one shoulder, my grandmother on one shoulder, and I'm looking the scene in front of me. My father is lying on the bed, and my youngest sister, who was only 11 years old at the time, she's looking up at me, extremely confused. Like she has no idea, all the commotion around her, what is going on. I have no idea what is going on, right? But when I look at the scene, I'm thinking, really? Like, am I looking at my father's body passed away? Like, has he left the body? I just couldn't understand. And then it was like, you know, like you see in movies, right? When everything stops, like time stands still. And then slowly it sort of comes together. And I was like, okay, fine. So what do we need to do next? Like, I guess he's no more. Mom is very upset, understandably. My grandma is very upset. My sister's very confused. My other sister's been holding fort until now. So now she has broken down because now she's got someone to rely on. My brother is feeling not sure what he's experiencing, you know, and young men experience trauma very differently, or at least they express trauma very differently. So it's like suddenly, and then the doctors are coming and saying, look, we waited for you way too long. We now need to take the body away. And I'm like, this was my father a few minutes ago. It's now a body. Like, what's going on? So that's how it happened. Like, that's how it unfolded. And then the next day I have like 100 people in our home because it was all very sudden and nobody expected it. And it was a Sunday. So everyone is thinking, oh, it's Sunday. Well, let's go and visit the family today because then we're at work and we don't have time afterwards. So, you know, all the practical stuff. So it was quite challenging when you lose a head of the family and he leaves behind a mother. So my grandmother, for her to lose a son is very, very difficult. A widowed wife, so for my mom to lose her husband, very difficult. A young child, right? My sister was only 11. So like there's 3 women, 3 different generations held together by one man who suddenly went. And he wasn't unwell or anything. He just like died very suddenly. So there was a whole like sorting out the business and taking control of the business that he was partway running, taking care of the logistic operations, right? The funeral and whatever else, probates and this and that needed to be done. And then the emotional impact that it has on the people around you and holding that together. And I was not in Birmingham, I was living in London, so I had a job to go back to. And that job now was even more important because that was the only source of income that we had. My siblings were still, like my sister had just finished her PhD, or she was just writing up her thesis. So my brother was just graduated. He hadn't quite found a permanent role yet. So there was no other source of income in the family, right? So I had to kind of, again, it was almost like an outer body experience that, okay, I have to separate I have to separate what Aarti as a person has to do here to what this Aarti as a different individual has to do in the world, right? So you kind of you learn crisis management very quickly, you learn leadership very quickly, right? In a way that, again, business school cannot teach you. So it was difficult, it was interesting, but very character building at the same time. You know, the overwhelm, the grief, the the emotional support that you become, the business person that you become, everything kind of happens all at once. So it was hard to navigate, but again, I don't look back on it with any kind of, oh no, this happened to me. It's not that. It was like one of those levers that I could not control. And my mom's grief, my grandma's grief, my sister's grief was far more magnified than my own grief, right? So you kind of put it in perspective. It's all relative, isn't it? To lose a son is very difficult. To lose a father is hard, but at least it's the right way around. You expect your parents to leave before you.
What an insightful way to reframe it.
But you don't expect your child to leave before you. So it was quite, it helped me. It helped me the skill I learned was it helped me put things in perspective. It helped me see a situation from the other person's angle, put myself in their shoes. And then your grief is much more diminished. All the trauma that you're experiencing is very diminished compared to what other people are going through. So you cultivate empathy and compassion and a change of perspective and everything. And you learn to operate in this gray zone that has been created around you. And you take on the personality and the role. So you're taking on the role of a father one moment. You're taking the role of the head of the family on a different moment. You're taking a role of an employee a different moment, right? So you're kind of, you take on those roles very quickly and you learn to be best at all those roles. And, culturally, like, it is difficult. Like, already, culturally, Indian community saw me as a bit of a stigma because of the cancer, right? Like, it's, why do you get cancer at this age? Like, it was all very difficult. But then, when you have a death in the family, now the stigma is on a widow. Now I have two widows in my family. I have my grandmother who's lost her husband. Now I have my mother who's lost her husband. So it was quite interesting challenges that I hadn't anticipated.
Of course.
And then you don't know the reaction of other people, etc. So again, you learn to read the room, adapt to it, and respond effectively, right? And you learn to respond in ways that you didn't think you would, right? So typically you're kind of responding to uncles and aunties in a certain way, and then suddenly you have to respond in a different way. So you just get on with it.
Oh, yeah. And I think this is a really great segue into my next question. And I feel like I already know what you're going to say, but I'm going to ask it anyway, because up until all this time, your whole experience has shaped you, and it feels like, oh gosh, when is she going to catch a break? But you're not living your life like that. You're living it as an opportunity as well to progress your own career and your own stuff as well. Where I just find that so remarkable and amazing that whilst you've got all this personal stuff going on, you're actually also like another person in a career field, which is spectacular. And so I want to fast forward to now, you're around 39, 40, where most people have settled. We're going into career now, so we'll relive the family, the personal side. We're moving on a bit to career shift. Most people around 39 feel slightly settled in their careers. Not you, because you are the change maker that you are. You pivoted your career and went into tech startups, and that's kind of like a reinvention, isn't it? Because you were also mentioning to me when we were speaking before that actually there's a lot of CEOs who are half of your age there. And by the time you're in your late 30s, approaching your 40s, there is that certain, you've experienced a certain thing. I'm not saying you're not flexible at that age, because that's not true, but it must be a total shift to what you've been used to. So can you just briefly talk me through that sort of experience? Whoa.
What happened?
Yeah.
Yeah. So actually what happened, like if you look at the trajectory, there's a lot of curveballs in life.
Yes.
Right? So you kind of think, okay, well, I'm used to curveballs.
Yes,
I'm not used to.
Yeah.
So to feel settled and to have a regular life without bumps, you kind of feel, am I missing something? You're looking over your shoulder.
Like you've not had that,
Did I miss something? What I meant to do with the crisis, and I didn't. But so there came a point where the 2008 financial crisis happened.
Yeah.
You may be too young to remember that, but the credit crunch happened. It was it was quite a bad one, and financial services were shaken, and no one thought that this sector would be shaken up. And then Lehman Brothers went bankrupt overnight, right? Literally,
yes, they did,
I remember 2008 October, and the bank I was working for at the time, a Japanese bank called Nomura, they made an announcement on public media that we're going to acquire the European and the Asian arm of Lehman Brothers, and then the US arm went to Barclays. So I was watching this news over the weekend, and I went to work on Monday, and I thought it was false news, and they said no, this is very real, and that's what it means. And so everything kind of started to unfold in on a commercial global level, right? So everything was changing, our roles were changing, our location, everything, right? There was suddenly an influx of a whole set of new colleagues that we weren't prepared or ready for. But it was an interest. I use that word interesting a lot because everything is interesting. Every experience you go through. So it was a different type of skills that you learned in that environment. Again, adaptation and all that, but still, how do you now navigate this commercially, right? What does it mean for you, your role, etc.? And I was lucky that I landed in a very, in a great role. I was leading. I was one of the leaders integrating the technology systems of the two banks for equities on sales, trading, and operations. And that took me to everywhere. It took me to Tokyo, Europe, Asia, everywhere. And I was leading this. And I loved doing it. But it was also very hard for me to see my friends, my colleagues who were my friends also losing their jobs and them struggling with their families because there were no jobs around at the time where it was very difficult. So it was very difficult for me to see that. And I almost felt guilty that I'm still enrolled and they are not, right? But I did that, and things settled down after a year or so, and I was in that role post Lehman Brothers for another 4 years, and I really enjoyed it. But by then, I could see, now this is 2012, so, technology is moving, like smartphones are really picking momentum, the app economy is growing, and banking is still reeling from the financial crisis of 2008. They didn't have a lot of money to innovate. They were reserved in how they thought about tech innovation, etc. So I was kind of looking at the world around me and thinking, I am here. I have been in this environment for a time and done very well, but look what's happening there. There's a fast lane and traffic is going in that fast lane and I don't know anything about it, right? I just use a smartphone, but that's not enough, right? And I could see how tech is shaping all the conversations globally. And I thought, well, if I want to remain, by now I am in my late 30s, and I thought I still have good 35 years of career ahead of me. If I don't remain relevant, if I don't do something to keep myself relevant, I will be relegated as one of these people who's been in banking forever, and that's all she knows, right? So I had to shake myself up and do something different. And luckily for me, the personal life was settling down, so I was in a position I had the mind share to put thought into this. And my sister was actually very supportive. So she was, we were living together and she had a great role. So she said, why don't you take some time out, get some headspace, and then figure out how you would enter this new world of tech, whether you want to be there, etc.
Yeah.
So I did that. I took some time out.
Okay.
I meditated in the mountains, which was nice.
Oh.
I spent some time in Stanford, in Palo Alto, and I could see how these entrepreneurs were doing what they were doing, innovation, etc. And then I came across this great company who were working in predictive texting.
Yeah.
So we now take that for granted, right?
Yeah.
Like now we type something on our phone and the phrase is predicted, it completes a sentence, it corrects everything. At the time, it was new. It was very novel, and only this company was doing it.
Okay.
And I managed to come in contact with them through various channels, and I kind of said, "Look, I'm looking for a role. Can you employ me?" Like literally, that was the conversation.
Yeah.
And they said, "Well, are you an engineer?" I said, "No." Are you a salesperson? No. Are you a marketer? No. I've been in investment banking. I have been in banking technology. I can bring that to the table. And they said, "Great, but how does that help us?" Right? It doesn't help us immediately. So it took me it was an introspection moment. So I went through and I said, "Look, here's what I know. Here are the skills that I can bring to you, and here's what I can do for you." And the interesting thing was they were trying to grow in India at the time. So they had a great presence in the United States, but they were trying to grow in India. And so the individual I was speaking with, he said, "You know what? I can offer you an internship if you're interested, a 3-month internship." I was like, seriously? I was an intern back at 19 or 20 when I was at university. I am now 39 years old.
Yeah.
And he said, "Well, this is the best I can do."
Yeah.
So I went back home and I had a conversation with my sister, and she said, "Look, you don't have anything else anyway, right? Like, what have you got to lose by taking on this internship? It's not like they know you. So you're going into a net new environment. People don't know you. That industry doesn't know you yet."
Yeah.
So I said, "Okay, fine, I'll take it." So I was an intern at that age, and I was earning £20,000 prorated for the 3 months that I was with them. But I then read the room and understood what they were getting at, but they were de-risking their business, right? So they wanted to grow in India. I came in, who knew the languages of the country, who'd spent like the first 16 years of her life there. You see how life comes a full circle. And then, and so I had working knowledge of that linguistic system and the country, right? So they said, "Okay, well, this is a project we can give to her safely because it's removed from our core business and it's not costing us much. So what have we got to lose?" And I was thinking, well, I'm getting an entry into a tech world that I have never worked in. And it's interesting. It's an interesting project. What have I got to lose? So it kind of became a win-win scenario for both of us. So I went in, and my first team meeting, I still remember, we were in a product management team meeting, and there were all these, the team were talking about jelly beans and Kit Kats and all that, and I have no clue what was going on. It's like, okay, I should at least try to make people believe that I'm understanding, and at some point I'm like giving up. And then at some point we walked out of the team, and I said, "Can we have a one-to-one? I really need to understand what the content of that conversation was." And it turns out that they were talking about the Android operating system. So in those days, every new version of the Android operating system was named after a candy, right? So version J was jelly beans, and version K was Kit Kat. So it was hilarious. But it was fascinating because I was learning from these young people. They were only in their 20s. The founders were in their late 20s. So, almost half my age. And I was, but there was kind of, you shed all ego, right? You have no ego. All you have is your enthusiasm and everything that you have accumulated over the past X many years in your life and your career. You're bringing that to the table, right? And with that, those are your ingredients. And you use those ingredients to make the meal that the company wants to see. So you just get on with it. And I loved it. I loved those 3 months of internship because I was very carefree. I was completely I lived with abandon, because I had nothing to lose and I could take risks that a senior employee could not, right? I could say things in my complete ignorance, which genuinely was in some cases, and I wouldn't be judged about it, right? And if somebody judged me, I'd be like, yeah, I'm just an intern. I'm sorry, I know nothing, right? You know everything. Please teach me.
I love that. So great. I just love to hear your journey of how things gone. And we would have been talking for an hour. We could go on for more, but I want to kind of skip some timelines now and talk about your work eventually moved into biometrics, digital identity. Wow, this is so fascinating. This is where the episode gets even more interesting about you. And these are areas that are so central to deepfake frauds. And it's something I mentioned earlier this morning when we started the episode, and basically the whole basis of your career right now, right? So what kind of drew you into that world of human behavior and digital trust? It's a loaded question.
If we go back to the identity at the start, right, where I talked about finding my identity in a new environment. So identity has always been very important to me. And when I left banking and pivoted to tech, the one thing that I was very sure was that I want to do work which is meaningful, has an impact in the world, and allows me to bring an identity to the people that I'm serving and to my own self.
Okay,
right? That was very important. So this work in predictive texting was all about that. It was allowing people to communicate in their own language on smartphones, which is so ubiquitous to their everyday living. So language is very much a part of your identity. And so if I'm able to allow people or empower people to do that, that's really important. So when I left that work, then I went on to Microsoft with that organization. I again did a lot of that work. And then eventually I worked my way up, and I was looking for a new role which would allow me to create a dent in the universe, right? And I came across this fabulous organization that was working in the space of biometric face verification. Now, when people hear about that, the first question is, oh, you mean how you unlock the iPhone with your face? So it was, in principle, you're unlocking something with your face. But in reality, it's a lot more than that. So what they were doing is that you were using face as a biometric to unlock access to things like finance, which a lot of people still do not have access to because people don't have identity. You know what I mean? So we take identity for granted. Our national insurance number, we all have a passport which has our name and our picture, our driving licenses, etc. But a lot of people in the world do not have this thing that is called an identity. And not having a piece of paper which is an identity really sets them back in life because they cannot access finance. They don't have access to loans. They don't have access to bank accounts, etc., etc. So when I came across this organization, and they were doing biometric verification for securing digital identity. So when you are applying for a bank loan and your bank needs to authenticate you to say, yes, you are Reena Singh, you used your face to say, this is the face of Reena Singh, and this is a real face of Reena Singh. It's not a picture or a mask or some digital version of her, right? So when I came across that business, it was like, yes, I found
this is exciting.
I found the thing that I'm looking for. So I joined them, and I was leading the whole kind of the central spine of the organization, the strategy, product, marketing, partnerships, etc. And it allowed me to do so much, not just bring that fantastic product to market, but bring it to the world where people needed access to identity easily and they didn't have. So suddenly language and being able to write didn't become a barrier. If you were a farmer and your fingertips were not quite clean, doing fingerprint scanning didn't become a barrier. Like everybody had a face that they could authenticate with and access. And simultaneously the world was moving. So digital identity in a lot of the parts of the world was becoming a thing. Singapore have a national identity. India has the largest biometric national identity program. So these countries who were leading in terms of technology were also all kind of having these identity programs weaved into their civic fabric in some way, whether nationally or at a state level. So it was really important for me and work that felt very meaningful and very impactful.
And it sure is. I mean, gosh, who knew the woman behind that is sitting right in front of me, especially for the texting and like just making everything accessible to people, because I have family who use that a lot and it's just amazing. So I love that. Now we're getting into that world now where you're finding quite exciting, the biometrics, the digital world, and that opens up a lot of like deception, fraud.
Exactly.
And that's that spicy topic that we're all so fascinated with, even me. So, and this is where right now, like when AI is such a huge factor of our lives now, it's like getting bigger. I guess it's always been there in some various forms, but now it's just getting a bit more commercialized. So we're almost aware of it. You get that. Deception's always been there, right? But you get that, like, people are trying to get more into that digital deception type of world through like deepfakes and stuff like that. So I'm introducing that concept, and I want you to give us a teaser, because we're going to go more into this in part 2. But how does that deepfake, that road to deepfake and that deception come into play now? Are we just more open to it?
Yeah, so until now, I had never in my career kind of seen bad people. You know what I mean? Like I was doing everything by the books. My colleagues were doing everything by the books. The people we were serving were very gracious. So if you think about bringing predictive texting to India, like the taxi driver in India is, using my product as a passenger sitting behind him saying, oh, wow, this is so gratifying, right? And, but I had never seen sort of bad people trying to break into it. When I was working in biometric verification, obviously it is a security product. So the most natural thing is somebody trying to break it. Yes. And I hadn't really given it any thought until I started working there, right? Until I started looking into it. And then it became an everyday incident, right? So, whoever client we are working with, the hostile parties hostile parties for those clients, they're trying to break our system so they can get access to these valuable assets that they had, whether it's identity, right? Stealing identities, stealing information, and then using that to further down steal money, etc. So for the first time, I was kind of seeing a world of fraud and deception that I had never encountered in my life ever. And then you start to see what's happening behind the scenes, because the beauty of cloud-based technology is that it's all there for you to see, right? The veil is very thin. The veil is just a little algorithm that sits on the cloud. So when we were supplying a product to security-sensitive organizations, enterprises, and governments around the world, the hostility from the other side, you could see that. So they would try to break the system by using digital versions of faces, the videos of faces, etc. So trying to break biometric authentication with digital replicas of the person who was trying to authenticate, and therefore gain access to their account or access to their identity, which they can then use for money laundering and other types of crime. So it was fascinating for me to see how they do it. And then, of course, that was when like deepfake became a part of my everyday existence almost. So, but at the time, deepfake as a term was still very new, and the concept was very new. in two ways. So one was for celebrities and politicians, well-known figures.
Yes.
So people would have fun with, replicating
Yeah.
Barack Obama, for example.
Yeah.
But then the other side was this dark underworld of fraud
Yeah.
who were using deepfake.
Wow. As we move into part 2, because that's a great segue, what's one thing that people need to understand about deepfakes?
So deepfake is a technology, right? It's an enabler of crime of different varieties. So deepfake in itself is not a crime, but it's a very, very powerful enabler. And what people have to understand is that a human brain has evolved to trust their senses.
Yes.
And we will go into that in more detail in the second part. But human brain has evolved to trust the senses. And when someone plays with your senses, our brain doesn't quite have the mechanism to cope with it. And that is exactly what deepfake does. And the people who use that know that instinctively. They may not know it formally, but they know it subconsciously that if I show you something that looks familiar and sounds familiar to you, your brain will trust it. And your biases will confirm, so you will suffer from confirmation bias. So even if your logical brain says, do not trust it, your confirmation bias says, Reena, trust it. Because you can see this looks familiar, it sounds familiar, what's there to not trust it? And this is really important that our audience understands.
Wow, this is like a mic drop moment and the perfect way to end episode 1. Aarti, thank you so much for this. It's been really insightful to understand your journey and how you got here and how you've got to kind of this world. And I can't wait to explore that in part 2. So keep with us there. And guys, if you've been watching or listening, thank you so much. I hope you found this insightful. Join us on part 2 as we dig a bit deeper into this. Until next time, keep on investing in your resilience.